International Criminal Court sentences former Democratic Republic of Congo Vice President Jean-Pierre Bemba for war crimes. The World Health Organization warns of low vaccine stocks as a yellow fever epidemic grips the continent. And combining a safari trip with a luxury spa. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent Makori. This is Africa 54. Former Congolese politician Jean-Pierre Bemba was sentenced to 18 years in prison by the International Criminal Court on Tuesday for heading a 2002-2003 campaign of rape and murder in neighboring Central African Republic. Bemba, a former Democratic Republic of Congo vice president, in March became the first person to be convicted by the Global War Crimes Court of crimes of sexual violence in war. Now, he also is the first to be held directly responsible for his subordinates' crimes. Judge Sylvia Steiner said troops from the Movement for the Liberation of Congo, which Bemba directed, had acted with particular cruelty when they rampaged through the neighboring country in support of then-President Ange Felix Patisse. Now, for some insight into the Bemba ICC case, Charles Jallo, a professor of international law at Florida International University, joins me live via Skype from Miami. Professor Jallo, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you, Vincent, for having me.
Now, first, your take, please, on the 18-year sentence for Mr. Bemba.
Well, the first thing to note is that it is the highest sentence we've seen from the International Criminal Court. A couple of other cases have been completed. In the Lubanga, we got 12 years, and then we had 14 years. So this is the highest sentence, so I think the court is trying to make a point.
Now, the interesting part is that he wasn't charged for things he did in the DRC, where he ran this, movement, but actually in the neighboring country. How did that happen?
That's correct. Well, it all turns on how the International Criminal Court functions. Basically, if something happens on a country's territory, and in this case, the Central African Republic, they're entitled to invite the prosecutor to investigate, as they did. And it doesn't matter the nationality of the person who committed the crime, so long as they occurred on the territory. So in this case, it turns out that Mr. Bemba fell within their sights because of what you pointed out. He was a military commander, and he had a lot of people working underneath him, basically, and they committed a lot of horrendous crimes, especially crimes of sexual violence. So it's a big moment for the ICC.
And we know that he was arrested in Brussels, he had traveled to Portugal and later just stayed on in Europe. Is this the best case of how the ICC can work when there is cooperation from the mother country and also other nations across the world?
I agree completely. This is a sample of how good cooperation can help the International Criminal Court. And as you know, Vincent, this has been an ongoing issue for the court, especially when it comes to African states. But it does show that the international community, when it comes together, can actually find some solutions. So in this case, yes, the country is in the region cooperated, but also the Belgian authorities were quite swift in implementing the arrest warrant. So he found himself going to The Hague. I think he was very surprised.
But let's face it, this only happens when a person is at least less than the president of a country. Some guy.
I agree to some extent, Vincent, although I have to say, you have to think about this as a system that international law is building, an international community. We've seen people who are not presidents, sitting presidents. That's been a bit of a challenge for the court. In the case of, for example, as you know, Mr. Bashir. But we've had former presidents not long out of power going to The Hague. I have Mr. Taylor from the Special Court for Sierra Leone for crimes committed in Sierra Leone, even though he's Liberia's former president. He was tried by the tribunal. We've had Jean Kambanda, the former prime minister of Rwanda, who was prosecuted by the Rwanda tribunal in Tanzania. He was also convicted. And of course, Milosevic from the former Yugoslavia. When he was president, he was indicted and he was arrested subsequently. So the glasses, in my view, are half full.
Yeah. Just very quickly, would you say that the DRC has been particularly cooperative when it comes to working with the ICC?
It has been, and as you know, that's where the first case, the Thomas Lubanga case, came from. So the DRC has been very cooperative. And honestly, I have to say many other African countries have been cooperating with the court. It's just that those that haven't cooperated are very good at attracting attention.
Sure. Well, Professor Jallow, thank you very much. We appreciate your perspective.
Thank you for having me, Vincent. It's a pleasure.
You're welcome. Now, Charles Jallow is a professor of international law at Florida International University, speaking to us live via Skype from Miami. Now, a panel of human rights investigators have documented what it calls massive crimes by Eritrea's government and military. The charges range from murder to slavery. The panel's report recommends that Eritrea's leaders be prosecuted by the International Criminal Court and other halls of justice. Viewers Jeffrey Young picks up the story.
The history of Eritrea is short and violent. Since gaining independence from Ethiopia in 1993, the Horn of Africa nation on the Red Sea has been the scene of both conflict with others and crushing internal repression. Eritrea has had only one president, Isaias Afwerki. He and his secretive inner circle have ruled the nation of 6 million people with an iron fist for its entire 23-year history. Now a United Nations-sponsored commission is calling on the International Criminal Court at The Hague to put Eritrea's civilian and military leadership on trial. Michael Smith, chairman of the Commission of Inquiry on Human Rights in Eritrea, explains the panel's findings.
Our report has documented a range of crimes that amount to crimes against humanity in Eritrea. We have found enslavement. We have found detention for indefinite periods. We've found murder. We've found persecution. We've found rape. We've found enforced disappearances. These are extremely serious.
The Commission's findings are similar to another one done a year earlier. That report was rejected by Eritrea's government, which has prevented Commission members from visiting the country for first-hand observations. The panel's conclusions were based largely on interviews with Eritreans in exile. This report does not specifically point to President Afwerki or identify culpable military officers by name. Bronwyn Bruton, who follows Eritrea for the Atlantic Council Research Group, says the omission of names weakens the report's recommendation.
If they've documented crimes against humanity, then they should be able to say who perpetrated them, because it's a very serious charge, and I would expect to see a list of those people included.
Other human rights activists, however, do not share Bruton's concern. Leslie Lefko, Human Rights Watch's Deputy Director for Africa, told VOA by Skype from Amsterdam that the names of suspected war criminals were left out for specific purposes.
There are a number of reasons. One is that they may have circumstantial evidence that points to certain individuals, but they don't have a level of evidence that would give them confidence to actually publish the names. They may also not want to put specific individuals on notice at this stage because, of course, that could affect the way that they behave.
One of those behaviors could be fleeing to another country. For instance, former Chadian President Hissène Habré went to Senegal after a 1990 coup ousted him. Just this year, Habré was sentenced to life in prison by an African Union tribunal. He is appealing the conviction. While the Hissène Habré verdict is promising, bringing other high-profile war crime suspects to trial remains difficult. The president of Sudan, Omar Bashir, was indicted by the ICC years ago, but openly flaunts an ICC order for his arrest when he travels abroad. The case of Eritrea presents other complications. It has been in conflict with Ethiopia since soon after independence. They fought a border war between 1998 and 2000 that claimed an estimated 80,000 lives. Skirmishes are still reported regularly as both sides maintain an aggressive stance. Human Rights Watch's Leslie Lefko says ending the virtual state of war with Ethiopia would go a long way toward improving human rights conditions in Eritrea.
Addressing the relationship, the kind of Cold War that exists between Ethiopia and Eritrea, is one part of removing justifications from the Eritrean government that allow it to continue trying to excuse the human rights violations it's committing.
Lefko says Eritrea and Ethiopia must settle their dispute. She recommends that both sides accept the results of previous efforts to define their common border. Another need, she says, is for a regional initiative to resolve a host of conflicts and political clashes that infect the Horn of Africa. Jeffrey Young, VOA News.
Well, thousands of Eritreans have left their homeland to seek refuge elsewhere due to what they say are the unbearable conditions at home. For more on why many would rather risk their lives to get out, I'm joined by viewer Salem Solomon, who is a native of Eritrea herself. Salem, welcome to Africa 54.
Thanks for having me.
Now, as regards the human rights reports, the reports of the violations of people's rights, the Eritrean authorities typically dismiss this as laughable reports.
Mm-hmm. So the Commission of Inquiry was started 3 years ago. Now it's fourth year. This is a new report that they're issuing. I think what's lost in this conversation is, of course, they were not allowed to go into the country. They've been trying a three-member commission that was formed to see what drives people out of Eritrea, the push factors that people are fleeing from. And they've been prevented from entering. So what they did was they went to Djibouti, they went to Ethiopia, they went to neighboring countries, including Europe, and talked to over 500 witnesses that gave them statements about horrible abuses, rape, victims. The last report was very scathing report, and the government has been very resistant and rejected it and called it politically motivated.
Mm-hmm. And we know that to leave Eritrea and move on to another country, even walk across the desert until you get to perhaps Libya and go to Europe, it's both risky and extremely expensive. Would somebody just leave because they just want to try life elsewhere?
Last time I was working on the story, Ms. Sheila Keith-Ruth said smuggling and trafficking are the symptoms of a system that traps the people from running away. If there wasn't a system that prevents people from moving around, if there was a freedom of movement within the country, if someone had the right to leave when they want to, they wouldn't put their lives in the hands of a smuggler that might extort them of an exorbitant amount of money or put them in a difficult position because they see their desperation. So Eritrea, any Eritrean that leaves the country, unless they are granted an exit visa by the government, they cannot leave the country legally.
Now, let's make this clear. The government says this is an okay country, everything is okay, but as a citizen of Eritrea, I can't just go and board a plane and get out of the country if I want to go to some other place.
I mean, aside from getting an entrance visa to anywhere you want, you have to get an exit visa from your own country as well. And so that applies to everybody in the country. I left legally myself, and I had to get an exit visa to leave my country.
Exit visa from your own country.
Exactly. And that's the system that exists today. Just last weekend, to put things in perspective, the tension between Ethiopia and Eritrea has escalated. The 14-year border conflict, a stalemate that has existed, now is festering, and the government has been using this as a reason for keeping the country under state of emergency. So we have to look at it from that perspective. But for the past 14 years, since the border conflict ended, this status quo has been the same status quo, and people within the country cannot move freely.
And very quickly, when we talk about some of the things that have been mentioned, the enslavement, the conscription into the military, how did this contribute to people's desire to want to leave?
So oftentimes when you talk to government officials, as you said, you mentioned, their responses have been, this is laughable, this report is laughable. Challenges coming from human rights groups and other advocacy groups have been, okay, if this is not right, if the report is false, open your doors and show us what's happening within the country. That's a legitimate question that the government can answer. Whether they say is politically motivated or not. Going back to what traps people. So if you're in the military or a military service or a civil service, if the country is governed in a way that your fate, your life is under the discretion of someone, a military officer, or even a minister who decides how and when you should go where, that puts the desperation level at a high level where people make decisions that are not good for their future sometimes.
Exactly. They would rather risk their lives to try to get out. Thank you very much, Salem.
Thanks for having me.
For those insights. While Salim Solomon is a journalist at VOA and also a native of Eritrea. We want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we covered. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa54. And check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince Makori. Coming up, the yellow fever epidemic in the DRC raises concerns about global vaccine stocks. Stay with us.
Health news and notes. This is Living Better.
A Formula One racing mechanic can change a tire in seconds, but safety is just as critical as speed. This combination of skills is also being sought by doctors and nurses from the University Hospital of Wales in the UK as they try to save critically ill babies. Dr. Rachel Hayward.
If your mechanic doesn't put a bolt on a wheel correctly, then you may lose your driver's life on the first bend. You know, if we don't do something right in our resuscitation processes, you know, we lose a baby.
So nurses at University Hospital are training like an F1 team, working together to improve efficiencies. Louise Cleaton is lead nurse for the project.
Just knowing what kit we need and what is essential in that scenario, then it can improve things.
The hospital also records infant resuscitation efforts with on-body cameras. I'm Martin Seacrest for VOA's Living Better.
I wanted to present music and a side of American culture that is most important to me, that is a part of who I am. They're going to get some incredible performances. That's one of the things I love, bringing these artists in so you can get to see them do what they do. It's soul music, and that's what music is. It's that which comes from the soul.
Well, it's time now for our health report, and joining us now is Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Medur with an update on the Zika virus. Hello, Lino.
Hello, Vincent. The World Health Organization is appealing for $121 million to combat the Zika virus over the next 18 months. The revised Global Strategic Response Plan highlights several specific characteristics of the Zika outbreak that need special vigilance and a global response. It says the absence of vaccines, treatments, and rapid diagnostic tests, as well as inequalities in access to sanitation and health services in affected areas, will require special care. The Zika virus is linked to microcephaly, an infection that causes brain abnormalities in newborn babies, and Guillain-Barré syndrome, a neurological disorder. The epicenter of the disease is in Latin America. Now, the WHO says the global stockpile of yellow fever vaccine may not be sufficient as another African country declares a yellow fever epidemic. The Democratic Republic of Congo declared a yellow fever epidemic in 3 provinces, including the capital Kinshasa, on Monday. The World Health Organization says there are 67 confirmed cases of the disease. About 1,000 people are suspected to be infected and are being monitored. Health Minister Félix Kabange.
Today I declare a localized epidemic of yellow fever in the provinces of Kinshasa, Congo Central and Kwango.
Healthcare officials say Kinshasa is the main concern because it has a densely packed population of more than 12 million and poor health infrastructure. Yellow fever is transmitted by the same mosquitoes that spread the Zika and dengue viruses.
There are about 1 million, roughly, who have already been vaccinated in Kinshasa. But 1 million out of 10 million means there are a lot of people who still need to be vaccinated.
First of all, the reason I'm here is because there are a lot of illnesses in our country, so I'm getting vaccinated to stop getting sick, and also for when I cross the borders, I have my vaccination card then.
Meanwhile, the World Health Organization says the current global stockpile of yellow fever vaccines may not be enough if there are simultaneous outbreaks in multiple densely populated areas. Almost 18 million doses have been distributed for emergency vaccination campaigns so far in Angola, Uganda, and the DRC. The current yellow fever epidemic started in Angola, but for healthcare officials, a major outbreak in the DRC's capital city of Kinshasa is a big worry.
Urban yellow fever is a particularly dangerous and concerning situation because of both the potential for explosive spread in urban settings with high mortality and also the risk for international spread as well as national spread from urban centers into areas with high population susceptibility to the disease.
The current method for making vaccines using chicken eggs takes a year. World Health Organization advisors have recommended using a fifth of the standard dose of yellow fever vaccine in the event of a global shortage, enough to immunize temporarily, but not to give lifelong immunity. An international charity is helping the visually impaired through a flying hospital staffed by volunteer doctors and medical workers. VOA's Mike O'Sullivan reports from Los Angeles, where the charity Orbis has unveiled a new version of its airborne clinic, which will take the latest medical technology around the world.
The world's only flying eye hospital was recently upgraded in a newly outfitted MD-10 aircraft to take medical workers to countries around the world for screenings and operations. Outside the flying hospital, conditions can be basic.
You know, you can be in Zambia and the power goes out in the middle of the surgery. You can be there and needing to scrub your hands before the surgery, and you have to use a bucket of water because the water's gone out.
Partnering with local clinics and hospitals, Orbis works in Cameroon, Ethiopia, Ghana, and Latin America.
You've then got Asia, where we work in China, we work in Vietnam, we have projects running in India, in Bangladesh. We work in Indonesia. So we take the plane wherever our gap analysis, wherever the needs analysis says we can be of help.
More than 285 million people around the world are visually impaired, most in low-income countries. 80% of visual impairment problems can be prevented or cured. Among those helping out are volunteer pilots. Captain Gary Dyson flies cargo planes for FedEx, but takes time off to fly for Orbis.
When you see a child who can't see on Monday and they can see on Wednesday, you're hooked. You want to see it again and again.
After an operation, the improvement can be dramatic, says a volunteer surgeon.
And when we remove the patch the next day, frequently the patient breaks into a big smile.
Orbis provides advanced medical training for local doctors and nurses in an onboard classroom that is linked electronically to the plane's operating room.
We teach others to save and restore vision, and we teach healthcare systems to make it a priority so the prevalence of blindness in their country will come down.
The newest version of the flying hospital and a plane donated by FedEx will make preliminary flights to several U.S. cities, then head to Shenyang, China in September. Mike O'Sullivan, VOA News, Los Angeles.
And that's our health report for today. To stay in touch with me, find me on Twitter @LenorMoudou. Vincent, back to you.
Well, Lenore, thanks a lot. Now, be sure to watch Lenore Moudou's health updates every Tuesday and Thursday right here on Africa 54. Well, it's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54. The perfect safari vacation just got a little more relaxing. We'll be right back.
If you've just joined us, I'm Mariama Diallo, and here is a quick recap of today's headlines. In Pretoria, violence breaks out after the ANC name a mayoral candidate not nominated by the ruling party's regional branches. In Nigeria, the naira has fallen sharply as the government allows the currency to float. In Niger, aid agencies struggle to supply water for more than 50,000 people in the desert who fled attacks by Boko Haram. Finally, in Egypt, a court decided to reject the Egypt border deal with Saudi Arabia, where Cairo would surrender control over 2 strategic Red Sea islands. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Welcome back to Africa 54. Here's what's trending. It's a new day in public transportation in the U.S. Capitol. The vehicle, a 3D printed minibus called Olai, capable of carrying 12 people, was unveiled by Arizona-based startup Loco Motors outside Washington, D.C. Olai was designed as an on-demand transportation solution that passengers can summon with a mobile app like Uber Rides, and it can be printed to specification in micro-factories in a matter of hours. Olai will be demonstrated in the National Harbor, Maryland over the next few months, with additional trials expected in Las Vegas and Miami. Olai's creator, Loco Motors, is also in talks to test the vehicles in dozens of cities around the world, including Berlin, Copenhagen, and Canberra. And in other 3D printing news, a group of young inventors in Mexico have developed a 3D printed cast that could spell the end of the cumbersome plaster cast. The Nova cast uses an open 3D printed plastic framework in place of the old enclosed plaster casing. Each 3D printed cast is custom-made to the exact measurements of the fractured part of the body. The makers say this will improve recovery times and potentially give more stability to the fracture. The company says the plastic construction of the Nova cast makes it more efficient and up to 10 times lighter than the traditional cast. It's also waterproof. Well, and finally, a new niche has evolved in the South Africa tourism sector: safari spa holidays. Blending two of the most popular luxury tourism activities is proving popular. One of the resorts that offers both wildlife and a spa is Kakloof Safari Spa, located 100 kilometers from the city of Durban. In addition to close-up encounters with rhino, buffalo, zebras, nyalas, and giraffes, the lodge also offers guests unlimited spa treatment and no fixed time for meals. Guests can have breakfast, lunch, or dinner at any time. Spa services range from facials and detoxifying scrubs to aroma Thai massages. And that is what is trending today. Well, and that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune in to VOA's evening radio show, African News Tonight, at 1800 UTC, and in the mornings today, Break Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC. That's Monday through Friday. Thanks a lot for watching. From all of us here in Washington, have a good night.
Welcome to the Voice of America's Newswords. This word has to do with international relations.
Sovereign.
Listen to the U.S. General and NATO Commander Philip Breedlove.
We've seen a nation cross an internationally recognized sovereign border and annex by force a portion of a sovereign nation. That changes the way we do business.
Sovereign means the right of a country to govern itself. A sovereign nation is independent from other countries.
General Breedlove complains that Russia took over part of Ukraine. Now, when you hear the word sovereign, your American English will be good enough to know what this newsword means.